Hi, I'm Jonathan J. Would you like to know the number one method that business buyers use to make the businesses that they buy more successful? On this video, you're going to find out. If you want to buy a business without risking any of your own cash, then click the information button up here at the top of the video and you can take my free online training course. So click the button, take the course, and let's get started. If you want to see more videos about buying a business, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and very importantly, click that notifications bell because that means that YouTube will send you a notification every time I release a new video.
So Alexis, when someone's buying a business, probably processes aren't top of their mind because they're excited about the sale and purchase agreement, getting the deal over the line, and that sense of personal achievement and accomplishment. But you drill down into the processes and why that is so important. So first of all, tell us, why is it important to have processes in a business that you buy?
Sure. So you're right that it isn't the first thought, and it's probably appropriate that's the case. There are perhaps some higher priorities initially, but it is key to get onto them at some point. And that's because, firstly, in terms of knowing what you're buying and knowing what and being able to be confident that there's going to be future cash flow in that business, requires that the ways in which the business operates, its processes, are in good shape, that they can be carried out by basically anyone. So if you acquire a business and you lose key team members, which is
quite often happens,
indeed,
yes.
You don't want to find that all of that knowledge walks out the door with them.
Yeah.
And so by having those processes in place, you significantly reduce the risk just out of the gate. Like, your chance of success with that business significantly improves if you have those
right. So this is key, isn't it? If you want a successful acquisition, processes aid that success.
Absolutely.
And maybe 80% of that success as well.
Indeed, because yes, you want great people in that business that you're buying. Yes, you want a great underlying business model and so on. But ultimately, the way in which that business operates, the way in which it acquires new leads and converts those leads into customers and serves them well and so on, is the nuts and bolts of how things are done. It's the step-by-step processes that it operates. And so if they are done on a wing and a prayer, if they're just in people's heads and so on, then you have so much risk and that things will just change over time. And you wouldn't even know as the acquirer necessarily because you've not been observing that business regularly.
Interesting. Now, I've got a number of questions on this, but the first question that people are going to be asking, watching this video, listening to this podcast, is who are you? So tell us, and I know your background, and I know the credibility that you have in this area, but just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this place today.
Sure. So I'm Alexis Kingsbury. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm the founder of AirManual and have had other software businesses and, in fact, various other different types of businesses over the last, I think, it must be around 20 years of being an entrepreneur in various formats. But my part of my career, I became a management consultant working with large organizations like Honda and AstraZeneca and government organizations and so on to sort out their processes, their ways of working. And back then I learned, how do you document a process? How do you map it? How do you make sure that you can improve it? I learned how you could take a team of 20 people and through process improvement alone reduce the amount of resource requirement down to 2 people.
Oh
right? My
goodness.
And okay. And that was what I was doing in these businesses. It wasn't particularly fulfilling in those projects where I'm essentially making people redundant. And so I'm really glad that the way in which we use process now at AirManual is a much more fulfilling.
Although I do have to say, quite often when you buy a business, it's flabby. It's got excess people. Quite often the retiring owner, especially retiring owners, have taken their eye off the ball a little bit, and everyone says, "Oh, I need an assistant." So everyone's now got an assistant. So you have all these additional people that you don't need. So an immediate cost saving is to rationalize the staff. And you're saying that having a process manual, an operations manual for the business can help us achieve that.
Absolutely, because you're immediately shining a spotlight on the ways in which things are done. And often it's a surprise to even the people that are within the business doing it, right? They go, oh, that's interesting. You do it this way, I do it this way. And, oh, maybe that's why that's causing a problem in accounts and why they're having to...
Yeah.
And I didn't realize you were doing 7 different workarounds just to deal with that. You know, we could all do it the same way and you wouldn't have that problem. And so that becomes all visible and you're able to quite quickly, like, it doesn't require a lot of skill. Like back when I was a process consultant, I literally was straight out of university, and sure, I was a smart guy who had studied management science and whatever and given a little bit of training, but it's not like I at that point had spent a load of years within businesses or studied my own or whatever. It was that was kind of early days in my career, and yet I was able to add all this value. And I think that's important because I think the risk is that business owners, business leaders assume that this is, you know, requires some element of genius to improve your processes. What it actually requires is transparency. It requires things to be documented so you can see it, because once you see it and you shine that spotlight, a lot of these things become obvious.
And I would say that 99.9% of businesses don't have this. Mm-hmm. The businesses that do are the franchises. So the franchises have to, because that's what they are selling. So are you saying that we're going to make our business, in effect, franchisable without the requirement of franchising it?
Often, yes. It's funny when you say that, franchises have got this in place. It's funny how many franchisees that we work with who are so frustrated with the fact that the franchisor doesn't have good processes in place.
I stand corrected, because I really thought that that would be a standard requirement.
You're right that should be.
Should be, yeah.
And in some cases, they have it in place, but it's often something that's not, selling a franchise is more a marketing exercise. And sometimes that means that area is lacking. But when done correctly, of course, yes, the franchisor should be providing all of those processes so that the franchisee can be successful and do things right. And when you do that as a franchisor, by the way, you massively increase the value of your franchise, because your success as a franchisor is not just based on the money you get up front at selling the franchise. It's the ongoing that you get.
It's the success of your franchisees, yeah.
And how do you get that? Well, you have to be adding value on an ongoing basis. And one way to do that is by providing the operating system that actually generates the results. If you just provide some branding and some ideas and whatever, and the franchisee takes that away and goes and uses that, after a while they'll say, well, why am I working under this franchisor? Like, I'm developing my own processes, ways to do it. Yeah. So I think, we're going on to a whole area on franchising.
So coming back to your experience as a management consultant, I mean, that obviously set you up with an insight into many different types of businesses, and documenting those processes allowed you then to create your own methodology for documenting processes, because you know it works.
Exactly right. And I think the interesting thing for me was when I then left as a management consultant, started my own business, initially a consultancy, and then we built a software business with my co-founder Paddy. And we built the first of our software businesses, which was Spider Gap, which we still own as a 360-degree feedback tool. But it was interesting that we were really good at the process side and yet didn't use it early enough. I think partly because I was worried about the people side. I that was an area that I didn't have any experience. At that point, I hadn't managed anyone, recruited anyone, and so I was terrified about doing that. And the mistake I made was that I focused on, I'll just bring in an A player and then leave them to it, because I don't want to mess them up. I don't want to ruin them, right? Yeah. And I remember hiring a salesperson who had done £1 million in revenue the previous year for a similar software tool. And I thought, fantastic, this is going to solve
just let them get on with it.
Yeah, just let them get on with it. Do not ruin their magic. They'll work out what processes and collateral they need, surely. And that didn't happen. And weeks go by, months go by, and you realise they're not even getting the results I was getting from doing sales calls.
I've got to say, there is always a disconnect between someone who's got those sales skills and a process. I mean, it's almost like there are polar opposites of personality types.
Yeah, and I exactly right. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes that does feel the case. You have people who have got all the skills and the enthusiasm and communication and so on, but they're not very process orientated. And so as a result, balls get dropped. They don't follow up with people. They don't have a particular way of managing a lead to the next step and all these sorts of things, which, by the way, when we come back to acquiring businesses, if you're acquiring a sales team that's got those sorts of people in it, it's going to create problems for you. So by putting those processes in place with a sales team, that was what helped us get results from building the sales process. But I did it too late and had to make that salesperson redundant before I even learned that lesson.
Because despite their talent, without the processes, it's just raw talent, and leads don't get followed up.
Yeah.
Leads get missed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I understand that.
And so you end up overly relying on this incredible talent, and particularly generally with most roles, you don't know within days or weeks whether it's going to work out.
Yeah.
In fact, normally, if it doesn't work out in days, weeks, or even the first month or two, that's been a problem of the recruitment process. Nothing else. Or the onboarding process. That's you, not them.
Yes.
Whereas what you're really assessing is for month 3, month 4, and onwards, are they the right fit? Are they able to deliver, and so on? So it's really hard. Like, it takes a long time, and so you need to get it right. And we made so many mistakes in those first hires. But fortunately, we did work it out, and now I have a business that's 7 figures and works with over 550 organisations around the world, including companies like Pepsi and 3M and Swarovski and so on, and a global remote team of people who work based in 9 countries from 5
I thought you were going to say there's like 2 people.
No, it's sadly not to that point. Although, actually, what do you do when one goes on holiday? So no, we have a bigger team than that. But it does run pretty lean. I think it plays big for the team.
And isn't that what most people want? I mean, no one says, I want to manage hundreds of people. If we can achieve the same outcome.
I'm interrupting your video with a very important message. If you are watching a video like this, it's probably because you're serious about buying a business. But watching free videos on YouTube will only take you so far. You need to take the next step. And the next step is a link that's somewhere on the screen up at the top, which takes you through to our free video training. There's no cost whatsoever. You watch the free video training, and that will give you some of the essential basics that you need. Now, if you get value from that, then I would invite you to be part of my next Fast Track program. Now, the Fast Track program has been running for a couple of years now. We've had nearly 3,000 people around the world on the Fast Track program, and it's a Zoom program that you can attend from anywhere. It's broadcast from my living room to your living room, where I will teach you what you need to know to go and buy your first business. And there's a Q&A section at the end of each of the training sessions, so you can ask me all of your questions. Now, if you get great value from that and you're really serious about buying a business, then there's my mastermind program, a 12-month program where we hold your hand through the business buying process so that you can buy your first company. And when you have, I'll invite you into our inner circle, which is exclusively for people who've bought their first business. So that's what we've got lined up for you. It's up to you whether you take the next step. Anyway, back to the video.
So I remember 30-something years ago, Michael Gerber first publishing the E-Myth book. And the E-Myth was pretty revolutionary at the time because he was maybe the first person to articulate work on your business rather than in your business, and it spawned a whole industry of spin-off books, and he was constantly speaking on stages about this work on your business rather than in your business. So is that really what we're talking about here? We're talking about the 2023 version of that, aren't we?
In many ways, yes. I think that some of the things that Michael Gerber talks about in those in E-Myth and Revisited and so on is that, as you say, work on the business, not in it. You need to document and delegate your processes. That's how you grow. That a business that doesn't have the way in which it works documented has no value. You know, those are extreme viewpoints that actually successful business owners have either solved in their businesses or more likely felt the pain multiple times.
Yes.
And I think that, as you say, Michael Gerber set that up to say, look, most business owners never extract themselves as the owner operator.
Absolutely.
You know, I think I remember one of the examples in the book. He talks about the busy baker who just can't extract herself because she's doing all of that. Contrast that with for my software business, for SpiderGap, I'm not required operationally in that business day to day, week to week. I took a 6-week road trip with my family across France and Spain of summer last year, and that business doesn't require me in it to make sure that everything's
So you actually proven your own concept.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was always the intention, was that partly obviously for ourselves as co-founders, because at the same time my co-founder was taking a 4-week holiday with his family, so it wasn't like, oh, he picked up the slack. We literally were both out of the business,
which I suppose, you know, when I talk to people who are buying businesses, they want to be hands off. I don't think I ever meet anyone who wants to buy a business and work twice as hard.
No.
So in actual fact, what we're talking about here, documenting processes, creating this operations manual for the business, allows someone to buy a business and be as hands-off as possible. I mean, you still own it, you still have a responsibility for it, but as hands-off as possible. So, okay, so this is really interesting, because I can absolutely see the relevance to my audience of business buyers and future business buyers. So I know, because I've watched one of your presentations, that you reference the sort of the popular books on the subject. Is the Clockwork?
Yeah, and including E-Myth and and Clockwork.
Yeah. And I've read these books. I've read these
Yep.
books. But I think you say something quite interesting when you bring up that slide in the presentation. It's like, all this theory is great, but how do you actually do it? So that's my big question to you. How do you actually do this? Because I think we understand the benefits, because I can see an immediate benefit when you're buying a business where it's so dependent upon the owner and getting everything documented before the acquisition, so the owner can disappear on their world cruise and it doesn't matter because the place doesn't fall apart, because you've got the documented processes. But how do we do this, Alexis?
Yeah, so as you say, there are many books, including E-Myth, that would say document and delegate your processes. And the problem is that I think most business owners have tried to do that in some form at some point in their career, and it always goes the same way. It ends up with a big load of documents that people aren't using, they go out of date, and you end up back at square one, and you say, oh, well, what was the point of all this if, I may as well have just done it all myself instead of spending all this time and fixing all the mistakes and then doing it myself. And so I think that's the kind of elephant in the room around a lot of those books, is that they tell you that you must do it, but don't give you the step-by-step guide on how to do it successfully in a way that actually means that you end up with processes that are able to be used, that are able to be improved, that the team can manage and are empowered to and manage positively, rather than you as the business owner having to crack the whip all the time and say, oh, have you updated this? And who was meant to be renewing our business insurance? Why hasn't that happened? Like, that's, removing yourself in the example of the baker, the fact that she's no longer making the loaves of bread, if she still has to stand there watching it all happen, it's not really made that much.
And that's
of a
where the
difference.
owner gets frustrated and sees someone not do it as well as they could do it.
Exactly.
And then they never move forward, because it's always restricted by the owner's time, energy, and inclination.
Exactly. And then, of course, the phrase that so many of us have had before and absolutely kills the process of growth in your business is, I may as well do it myself. Right?
And we've all caught ourselves saying
we've all
that.
been guilty of that.
Yeah.
And of course, the problem is sometimes it has truth to it. Particularly if you're delegating something that's a one-off task that you're never going to need to do again.
Yes.
Maybe it would have been quicker to do it. But in most of the case in your business, you're trying to create stuff that repeats, that grows, that recurs, whether it's sending invoices or sorting out your annual accounts or recruiting someone or training someone, making a sales call. All of those things need to happen regularly in your business. And if you continually perpetuate it would just be faster if I did this myself, then you hold back.
You
the
can't
business
ever
back.
achieve that growth,
Exactly
can you?
right.
Because you're going to be limited, always limited.
Indeed, but what creates that is when you've spent a load of time what you think is documenting processes, training the team member, and then you watch it all collapse in front of you, where you're saying, well, they've made so many mistakes, it'll take me longer to review all of this and fix it than it would have been. And that's the loop we get stuck in.
Sorry for interrupting your video, but I wanted to introduce you to a great lawyer in the UK who can get your deals done for you. He's worked for 50 of my mastermind clients in the last few months alone. His name is John Andrews, and I've got his details right here in my little black book of contacts. You can phone him on 0345 241 2494, or you can email him on johnandrews.deallawyer@jmw.co.uk. If you want someone who can get a deal done, he is your guy. So let's get back to the video.
And is it worth, because I'm actually thinking of a situation I'm in right now with something similar to this, is it worth getting through that pain in order to, the pain of, oh, this is still not right, we need to go back to the drawing board on this, in order to eventually release yourself from having to do it?
So I'd say, yes, it is, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Okay.
So it's certainly better to go through that pain, experience it, get frustrated at the person you've hired, come up with, have lots of meetings, discussions, and iterate, and eventually get to a point that you can extract yourself from the day-to-day finances, sales, whatever it is that you're delegating. However, that isn't the fastest route or least stressful route to achieve it. And so there is absolutely a better way of doing that. But given the options of go through that painful iteration or just revert to, I'll just do it myself, the doing it yourself route is never a sustainable option.
No.
You'll always eventually go, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? Or at least I hope you will. Otherwise, you've forever got a job.
Well, this is the thing.
Right?
Are you buying a business?
Yeah.
Are you buying a job? So I tried to do something similar, and I'm casting my mind back to, maybe it was like 2004. So what's that? 19 years ago. And I remember sitting down. I remember it so clearly, actually, sitting down with a room full of people in the admin office of my business. So this is all like the back office people. And I said, okay, how do we deal with an inquiry? So someone phones and says they're interested in one of our products. How do we deal with that inquiry? And I asked everyone, I started asking people in turn, and then it became a conversation in the group. And there were maybe 7 people sitting here in front of me, sitting in a semicircle. And I realized that there wasn't one way of doing it, a little bit like your example earlier. And it was all very, very confusing. So I said, we need a process, because I'd read the E-Myth. And we started to document it. And we put it on a piece of paper, and we realized there were so many different steps and different things. And if this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And I tried to implement that and failed miserably because people rebelled against following the process and just preferred to do it their way. Now, I am not a great manager. I need to emphasize that. I'm the worst manager of people. It's better if people don't know I exist, okay? I'm a terrible manager of people. I've got a feeling it was my fault. Was it my fault?
Oh, interesting question. Was it your fault? Well, I guess at its top level, with when you're owning a business, we can always say, as the business leader, it's always our fault. Like that empowers us and enables us to actually do something about it. So I'd probably say, yes, let's take ownership of it and apply a different approach. Because I think that if the answer is that the employees all rebel against it and say, no, I'd prefer to do it my own way, what are the failings of the business leader? Well, not communicating the benefits of doing it one way, not communicating the pain and frustration that it causes them, not even you, when it's done in different ways, and actually getting to a point where they can agree on a common way of doing it. Or if they can't, getting them to at least agree that it's better to do it consistently one way that might be slightly suboptimal in their view than it is for them all to do it 8 different ways. And so I think that could be the failing, is kind of if you step back from that and say, oh, well, it sounds like too much effort to get everyone to do it the same way, I'll just let them do it their way. It means that you'll end up with inefficiency in that
Yes.
business. It means that, by definition, one of those ways is considerably worse than the other ways. So you've got that in there. But also in terms of being able to, what happens when you bring someone else and new into the business? Which way do they learn? What does it look like for that new employee?
It's a mishmash of eventually probably making up their own version based upon bits they've heard other people do.
Which means it takes them ages to get
Yes.
up to speed and add value in the organisation. It doesn't give them a great impression of how the business operates. In fact, it sets a bit of a culture of just, we make it up as we go along, and you create and build a foundation and a business that operates in that way. So instead, what I would propose is really creating more of a process culture, an attitude within the business, which is that actually we want to be professional people that provide consistent results to our customers, that work in an efficient way, that's not frustrating to each other. Because that's the other thing, is how do you improve? Like if you identify, you know what, there's a really good question that works as part of our inquiry management and sales. If we just ask this little question here, it really helps get the conversation moving faster. How do you implement that with your team? They've all got different ways of having those conversations. Maybe one of them's not even having that conversation. Like you can't continuously improve your business. And if
there's no benchmark
exactly
or standardization of how we do it, and now we want to improve how we do. So I've seen this with sales people. So I am a big believer in sales scripts, but I think scripts is the wrong word, because people think you've got to read the script. I don't want to sound wooden. So I always used to say to people, who's your favorite actor? And they'd say, and say my examples are going to age the conversation. They say Brad Pitt. I mean, no one says Brad Pitt now, but years ago, people would say Brad Pitt. And I thought, okay, does Brad Pitt sound wooden? Oh, God, no, of course not. Well, he's using a script. He actually learned what he said, and he said it the same every single time he said it in every rehearsal. And it kind of proves a point, but to be fair, it never made any difference because people just didn't like scripts. But you're absolutely right, because if you ask this question, these are the questions that you need to ask to understand exactly what the client needs so you can match them up to the product or service that suits them best. And if you don't ask that question, they might end up with something they're not happy with, and then we've got an unhappy customer rather than a happy one. So how do we build processes into something, sales, which everyone feels should be organic?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So it's about, I suppose to some extent, it's about going quite far into the detail, but then taking at least one step back away from what you're describing there. Because if you get to a point where, yes, absolutely every word out of that salesperson's mouth is scripted, it will sound wooden. It won't follow the conversation.
Yes.
And number one rule of selling should be that you should be speaking significantly less than the other person.
Absolutely.
And you need to be responding to what they say. So it's not about making everything scripted to that degree, but it is about having a structure.
A structure, a framework.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like if I said, you can have two sales conversations, one of them is going to do it completely off the hoof. He's a lovely guy, he's very smart and so on. The other one, he's average, but he has a structure to go through. Mm-hmm. You're going to prefer the structured conversation because you can be more confident that it's going to actually serve your needs. You can be confident that they're going to ask the right questions to get under the skin of what your challenges are and work out whether their product or service is going to be a good fit for you. You can be confident that they will then demonstrate the things about the product and service that are going to be relevant to you. You can be confident that they will be really clear with you about the options for how you can work with them, what the prices are and so on, rather than with the other person where you have a lovely chat, you come off the end and you go, I'm not really sure what the price was, but I really like the guy. Like those are,
yes.
And of course you don't have to only have one or the other, because the real power is when you take the structure and the smart questions and the ways in which we can describe our product in a fast way that means we can get back to questions.
It gets the idea across very quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You take that and then you add those skills of that A player and boom, suddenly you've got a business that sings. Because you've got someone who can communicate effectively and so on, but they're using a structure to get decent results.
So I have, without realizing it, have done something similar over the years where I've tried to make the process leading up to, so in any business that I've owned, I've tried to make the process leading up to the salesperson having that first contact do most of the selling.
Brilliant.
So when it gets to the point of the salesperson is the closer or the order taker rather than relying upon their genius. And then my other sort of flash of inspiration was that if I could create a process that allowed an average salesperson, which is the majority of them, to create
by definition
extraordinary results.
Yep.
I don't have to go and find those 1 in a million A players. I can have, with the greatest of respect, I can have a room full of B players producing A player results. Is that what we're talking about
exactly
here?
Right. Which, of course, then we get onto one of the other benefits of doing this in an organisation you're acquiring or whatever, right, is that you're able to significantly reduce your salary bill by not requiring A players or being able to make good use of the resources that you have or whatever it is. It means that in my businesses, I've been able to hire at quite a junior level into roles that traditionally might be very high salaries, and yet because they've got the processes and so on, and it's not just the process for how to do it, it's the process of how to learn how to do it. So for example, I've got software business in the form of AirManual, where people will have a discovery call to learn whether it's a good fit for them. They arrange the call, and on that call, they will be taken through a series of steps to ask them questions to understand any challenges and see if it's fit. Now, I don't just give my sales consultants that process and say, off you go then. There is a training checklist that they go through to make sure that they're going to be able to do a really good job of those conversations, which starts off with them reviewing and walking through that structure, the script, but we don't call it that because people hate them. But then includes things like role plays, so that they can practice those skills and that they can get feedback on how to improve it and so on. So that they can do a really, really good job. And so I don't have to rely on, they say that they've had 3 to 10 years worth of sales experience somewhere else. Presumably they'll do a good job. I know they'll do a good job because they've gone through this process.
And we know a lot of those CVs are a little doubtful, aren't they?
Exactly right. But they're salespeople, so of course they put their best foot forward.
Yes.
And so, but I don't have to rely on that because I've got the processes in place that mean that I know that within a week of someone joining our organization, as long as we've tested that they've got the skills in terms of good communication and listening and problem solving and enthusiasm, that the process we've got will get them to a point that within a week they can start doing discovery calls with customers.
Oh, very, very good. Yeah,
and even better, that it takes less than an hour of my time with them, which means if you said to me, Alexis, I'm going to 10x the number of inquiries that you've got into your business, that wouldn't fill me full of dread. I wouldn't suddenly think, but how the hell am I going to train all the salespeople I'm going to need? I know that they can follow a predictable process that's going to require less than an hour of my time.
So I'm thinking,
to support them.
I mean, that's just incredible. It's a dream come true.
Absolutely. It's taken a long time to get there.
Absolutely, but obviously we can leverage your knowledge and experience. So I'm thinking about my clients on Mastermind who have bought multiple businesses. I mean, here in the podcast studio today, I've interviewed someone who bought 21 businesses. Well, actually, he's bought 25. He bought 21. He sold 4, bought another 4. Yeah. So he's ended up with 21. And someone who's bought 9 businesses. So just the 2 people I've interviewed this morning, they bought 30 businesses between them. And the integration of those businesses is really hard work because everyone does things in different ways. I think what you may have presented here is the solution to that challenge. Is documenting processes to make them consistent, even if it's down to invoicing and invoicing out to customers and handling invoices from suppliers. Whether it's onboarding new staff, HR, contracts, every element of that.
I absolutely agree. And in fact, that's a great illustration of the example that you were talking about earlier, where we say, okay, so we're buying these businesses, we're bringing them together, and they've all got slightly different ways in which they process supplier invoices or slightly different ways in which they invoice customers. Do we go, they don't want to change. They want to all do it slightly differently. They like their own ways. They've rebelled against me. So as a result, I'll let it slide. it's like you're not going to get any of the economies of scale. You're not going to get the benefit of the fact that you're bringing these organizations together.
Yes.
Worse than that, you're leaving inefficiency in the business. Like the whole point of acquiring the businesses and putting them together and integrating them and so on is to create something that is more valuable, either financially as an
Yes.
asset or in terms of what it can produce in terms of cash flow,
Absolutely.
or what it can do for the world, for people. It can't do that if you just leave them all separate. You may as well have just left them all separate.
Yes.
It leaves so much money and
yeah,
opportunity on
absolutely. And you know, probably the fastest way of finding additional profit is not actually to go out and find new customers. It's to optimize your current processes to make sure that not only are your customers served best and have the products and services that match their requirements, but also the provision of those services is a process rather than a how shall we do it today.
100%. And what I really love about the space in which you're operating around acquisition and so on is you and the people that you work with have an edge and an opportunity that most business owners don't, which is complete visibility of different ways in which it's done across different businesses that
Yes.
they acquire, so that they can see one of those ways will be better than the others. And your opportunity is to identify which of those is the best way and apply it to the others. Like we've got a client who owns three essentially sort of plumbing, heating, air conditioning type businesses. And he finds himself in a situation where he's got one that seems to be generating profit and doing one really well, one that's kind of okay, and the other one that's sucking up all the cash from 1 and 2, and meaning that it,
You know
giving
something?
more headaches.
I was speaking to someone earlier today who said exactly the same
Right.
thing. Yeah.
Now, of course, the opportunity that he has that most business owners don't have if they're in business 3 is that he should be able to look at what's happening in businesses 1 and 2 that is different. How are they doing it differently? You know,
Yes.
is it that business 1's doing so well because they're great at cash generation and how they make sure they get paid, whereas business 3 barely has a load of bad debts and's really slow to get paid and so on?
Yes.
Or is it that they're just really good at converting their sales? So how are they doing that? Or is it that actually everything else is pretty much the same or worse, but they're really efficient in their delivery? And the opportunity that you have is to say, right, let's get that documented. Let's then bring that over to the other businesses 2 and 3. And you don't even need to do it as big bang. You can literally take individual processes and get them operating it and get it working and go, oh, wow, okay, now we're saving money, converting more, generating more leads, generating more cash.
Overall, the whole group benefits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, vice versa. There might be little pockets of brilliance in business 3, like how they generate loads of leads. Maybe they generate 10 times the number of leads, but half the sales. And you could say, okay, well, let's take some of those things. And that's something that as the acquirer, you're in a unique position versus most of the business leaders out there. And so if you can harness that, and you know the way that we work with that particular client, we provide a software platform for documenting in a way that reduces the friction and avoids the problems that we've talked about where you just end up with everything going out of date. But also we have consultants where literally we spend time with the people in the business to get it documented and trained and implemented.
Because it's so important.
Because and for the acquirer who doesn't want to get stuck working in the business, they're just able to say, well, I've spotted my biggest problem is business 3 is losing money, and this is where I think the problem is. And I've looked at business 1 and I think they're really good at this. So all I need to do is document that, and as a result,
How do we map it
can you
across?
help me do that? And either they do it themselves or they get support doing it. But the potential, like we're talking easily 6 figures in value for most of these types of businesses.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I've got clients who are sort of have 8 figures of revenue as standard. So you know you find a 10% uplift, and suddenly you've got yourself another million pounds. I want to talk to you about how we can use processes and systems to increase the value of our business when we sell it.
Yeah.
But we're going to do that on a separate part 2 video. So we're going to pause for today. Alexis Kingsbury, thank you so much for your input.
It's been a pleasure.
And I will see you on the second video.
Looking forward to it.